You're listening to the Armchair Cricket Podcast.
Hello, all. Welcome to another episode of Armchair Cricket Podcast, a podcast focusing on Test cricket by armchair critics of the game. I'm your host Ajit, and I'll be joined by Chetan, who's a returning host. Chetan will be helping us analyze the recently concluded first Ashes Test, as well as the India versus West Indies T20 series. Our regular host, Giri, is away on a holiday still, and he'll be joining us in one of the upcoming episodes. Without further ado, let's have a quick listen to what Chetan has to add regarding the first Ashes Test.
Hi, my name is Chetan and I am going to give my views on the first test of the Ashes 2019 being held in Edgbaston in England, and also the T20I series between India and the West Indies. Post the World Cup, I think people are still reminiscing about the final and what could have been, and whether it was lucky or unlucky for the New Zealand team, or lucky for the England team basically to lift the World Cup under controversial circumstances, which was not really controversial, but it was made out to be because the rule wasn't really used before so much, and it definitely wasn't used in such a critical moment in any other game. Coming to the Ashes Test, I think the world saw the re-emergence of Steve Smith and the effectiveness of Nathan Lyon. Steve Smith, coming after the ban, 1-year ban served for the Sandpaper Gate, proved who he is, because his innings of a century, 144 from 122 for 8 on the first afternoon, clearly had Australia back in the reckoning in the game, and at the end that's what won them the match. The second innings, however, he added salt to the wound by producing another innings, joining fellow Australians like Steve Waugh, Matthew Hayden recently to make a pair of centuries in an Ashes Test. Stephen Smith came up with an innings of substance to silence his critics and to rediscover himself on the international stage after the World Cup, where Australia lost in the semi-finals. Once the England's batsmen started batting, Rory Burns made a fantastic 133 to give them a lead of 90. But once again, the Australians in the second innings, with ideal batting conditions, put up a huge score, with Matthew Wade getting his third 100. Once the score or the target for the Englishman went past 250, it was always going to be trouble, as Nathan Lyon was definite to spin a web around his batsman. He himself saw another 5-wicket haul in another country, where now he has 5-wicket hauls in 7 different countries, which is 3 more than Ravichandran Ashwin and Yasir Shah with 4. So as we head forward to the second test at Lord's, where Chris Wokes is having a wonderful time, whether it may be a one-day international or a test match, England would likely look at Jofra Archer as a likely replacement. That's it for the Ashes. Coming off to the West Indies and India series, I think it was going to be a tough one at the beginning of the series, with 2 games being played at Florida. People expected a lot more out of West Indies in this format, basically because this is the only format they can compete against the tougher teams. However, being used to the flat English batting conditions during the early part of the World Cup, they struggled to cope with the ball not coming onto the bat in the T20 series, and ended up losing it 3-0. Rishabh Pant was the bright spot for the Indian team because of his twin failures in the first 2 matches. People really questioning his approach towards his innings, but again he said that right in the third T20I, with Captain Kohli as well chipping in with a 50. The main gains for the Indian team looking ahead was the bowling of Deepak Chahar, who picked up 3 wickets, as well as some opportunities for people like KL Rahul, who came in place of the rested Rohit Sharma in the third T20I. And now they look forward to the ODI series, which begins on Thursday, the 8th, and which will have 3 ODIs, and then we have a couple of test matches. Looking once again at the T20 series, the failures of people like Hetmeyer and Nicholas Pooran, who was the form player for them during the World Cup, was a huge setback for the West Indies. Also, where West Indies cricket stands now, it wouldn't be a bad idea for Shea Hope and Jason Holder to play all formats and all games in each of those formats, because for a weak team to have split squads for different formats doesn't really augur well for the future, because they are in and out of the team and they don't have a rhythm. For example, a person like John Campbell, who had a glorious innings of 179 in the Tri Nation series in Ireland before the World Cup, was dropped just after 2 games. So this chopping and changing certainly will not help the West Indies team, because they are unlike the Indian team, who are spoilt for choices. Even for India, that's what happened in the World Cup semi-final, where they left out Mohammad Shami, and it really did not pay them any dividends. Thank you.
Thanks to Chetan for that very succinct summary of the first test of Ashes and the West Indies versus India T20 series. Now, moving on, let's take a quick look at the 3 T20s that have been played between UAE and Netherlands, held in the Netherlands. So the first of those T20s was held in Amstelveen on the 3rd of August, which United Arab Emirates won by 13 runs. Batting first, they scored 181 for 5 thanks to Ashfaq Ahmed's 54, Mohammad Usman's 52, and they were able to restrict Netherlands to 168 for 4. It was a bit of a strange thing that it looked like Netherlands did not go all out towards the end, with only Edwards, the keeper, making 34 of 20 balls. Stahl, who was batting not out at the end, had made 19 of 17 balls. Also, Matthew O'Dowd, who was opening, made 51 of 35. In the second T20, which was again played in the same ground at Amstelveen VRA, United Arab Emirates won this match by 5 wickets. So, in this game, Netherlands batted first and made 136 for 9. This was a little bit of an under par score, thanks to Ben Cooper's 46 and the captain Salar making 34. But the United Arab Emirates were able to chase this down very comfortably, making 140 for 5 with 3 balls to spare, thanks to Ramesh Shahzad's 49, Mohammad Usman's 34, and the opener Ashfaq again making 25. In the last of the 3 T20s that have been played so far, UAE batted first. This was actually held in The Hague, by the way, and the UAE batted first and they made 152 for 8, and they were able to restrict Netherlands to 138 for 9. So in this case, Ashfaq Ahmed again made a half century, making 56, and there were steady contributions down the order. But Netherlands, in spite of a very strong 65 by O'Dowd, were not able to carry on, and they lost by 14 runs. So it looks like it's a bit of an upset when it comes to results, it looks like, because Netherlands were the fancy team playing at home with all the local support behind them, but they have fallen behind 3-0, and the 4th T20 is scheduled to be played today, that is the 8th of August. So we'll keep an eye on this series as well. Now, if you were to look at the last T20 international of the women's Ashes, so this was a consolation win for England women, who beat Australia by 17 runs. So this game was played at Bristol, where England women batted first and made 139 for 5. So Danny White made 20, Heather Knight made 23, and Linfield, who scored 26, and Catherine Brunt, who scored 25, finished strongly for England. In trying to chase this, Australia fell short in spite of some good efforts, Healy making 28 and Elise Perry, who made another fantastic 60 not out. But this was not enough, as Catherine Brunt had an all-round role, as she also took 3 wickets and finished the man of the match. Now then, moving on, let's take a look at some of the interesting news from outside of the cricketing field. The most important news, you could say, that one heard in this interim was that Dale Steyn, probably who can be called as the best fast bowler this century, has announced his retirement from tests. So he finishes with 439 wickets from 93 tests, and he's the highest wicket taker for South Africa. Apart from having one of the best strike rates for any fast bowler ever, he also had a lot of awards bestowed on him. For example, he was the #1 test bowler for a record 263 weeks between 2008 and 2014. He's won the ICC's Test Cricketer of the Year in 2008. He was the Wisden Cricketer of the Year in 2013. Also, he was the leading cricketer in the world as named by Wisden Almanac in 2014, and so on. So all of these show how effective he has been. Unfortunately, due to injuries plaguing the latter part of his career, he had spent 41 months going from 400 to 422 wickets, and earlier this year he has overtaken Sean Pollock and now was the highest wicket taker for South Africa. So I would say he retires from Test cricket with a very, very good record, something that every aspiring fast bowler can look up to. But he's still available for selection as far as limited overs cricket is concerned and T20s abroad are concerned. So we wish him all the best with his career. Going further, it has come to our notice that Pakistan Cricket Board has planned to play PSL 2020 entirely in Pakistan. This is a very good news for cricket fans in Pakistan and around the world. So, four cities, Lahore, Karachi, Multan, and Rawalpindi, have been chosen to cover the 34 games that are slated for this tournament. So, this remains a really, really big decision considering that they have been wrapping up the amount of international cricket that's played. For example, some T20 11s had visited it, a World 11 had visited it. Therefore, this is a logical next step. Also, as far as PSL is concerned, they played four matches and then only the finals earlier and so on. So they're ramping it up nicely, and we really hope that this comes to fruition and international cricket returns to Pakistan as soon as possible. The next important news that we can bring to your notice is that there has been a coaching roulette going on ever since the World Cup ended. Looks like at least three international coaches are set to lose their jobs. Otis Gibson, who was the international coach or the head coach of South Africa, will not be continued as the coach. Mickey Arthur, who was also similarly the head coach of Pakistan, would also not continue. And Chandika Hathurasinghe, who was the head coach of Sri Lanka, will also lose his job. So, what happens with Gibson and Arthur as far as their career is concerned next is not yet clear. But at least as far as Hathurasinghe is concerned, it looks like he'll be probably in the top three choices for Bangladesh top coaching role. So earlier we remember that Bangladesh also had let their coach go. So it looks like some of these people will play a bit of musical chairs. Maybe one person may replace another in a different setup and so on. Another important thing is all the support staff, maybe the batting coach, the bowling coach, the fielding coach, and so on, in each of these setups are also set to be replaced. So it's going to be an interesting couple of months for these renowned coaches. What with India also looking for a new head coach and so on. It's going to be a very interesting period. Now, if we go further, we have heard that Shakib Al Hasan, the renowned cricketer from Bangladesh, has called for a rotation policy. So, what he says is that BCB, that is Bangladesh Cricket Board, should make a clear rota of rotation so that players are aware beforehand so that they get breaks. So, why he says this is he was given a break from the recently concluded 3 ODI series that was played in Sri Lanka, but not every cricketer was given this opportunity. Also, some of the players were carrying injuries from after the World Cup, like Mashrafe Murtaza, Mahmudullah, Mushfiqur Rahim, Mohammad Saifuddin, Mustafizur Rahman, and Musaddiq Hussain. All of these were chosen in the initial 14-man squad that was supposed to tour Sri Lanka. It turns out that Mashrafe Murtaza could not tour, and with some leading cricketers missing, Bangladesh struggled and lost the series 3-0 to the hosts. That apart, I think it's good that the point Shakib makes that there be a clear rotation policy and people who've played a lot of cricket be given a break so that they can come back strongly both mentally and physically. Many countries, including India, Australia, England, all of these have a rotation policy in place, which is enacted from time to time. Even skippers are allowed to rest. So I think it's as important as getting a mental break as much as a physical one, because players always play through niggles. We know this. But even turning away from the game and sort of switching your head off and trying to not worry about how the next upcoming period of play will go will be very beneficial to players. I think that's what he's highlighting here. Going further, Umar Akmal, the slightly controversial cricketer from Pakistan, has come out with another interesting statement. So he's accused former test player Mansoor Akhtar, Pakistani former test player, of a corrupt approach during the ongoing Global T20 Canada. And he's brought it to the notice of the PCB's anti-corruption unit. So if this turns out to be true, it looks like he may have nipped one such bad incident in the bud. So that's well done to Umar Akmal. But knowing that he has a little bit of tendency to jump the gun, we don't know how this is going to evolve. So we're going to keep our eyes trained on this specific incident as well. Now, as a unfortunate fallout of Zimbabwe being suspended by the ICC, it looks like at least two countries have benefited from this. So in the women's cricket, Namibia, who finished second to Zimbabwe in the African qualifiers, will actually be allowed to take part in the ICC Women's T20 World Cup, or at least the qualifiers for it. So basically there'll be two qualifying spots from a bunch of 8 countries that are going to fight for it, and this will be held in February, March next year. So Namibia or Namibian women's team will take their place there. Also, the Nigerian men's team, they'll be taking part in the men's T20 qualifier because again they're the third African side and they had finished third in the African qualifiers. Because Zimbabwe are now disqualified, they'll be taking the place of Zimbabwe in the men's T20 World Cup qualifier. So it's a good thing because Zimbabwe is now unable to participate or is not able to participate. It looks like some of these other countries are able to benefit from it, but is it a good thing for Zimbabwe? Definitely not. So we really hope this fiasco with Zimbabwe, with Zimbabwean board and so on, comes to close quickly, and Zimbabwe resumes its international cricket. In a little bit of a farcical news, it looks like Dravid is the latest ex-Indian cricketer to get a conflict of interest news or a conflict of interest notice from the Ombudsman, Justice DK Jain, retired. It looks like this person, who's both the ethics officer and the ombudsman, has chosen to point out that Dravid is a paid employee of India Cements. Unfortunately, this does not show BCCI in a good light, simply because this specific thing was one of the holdups for Dravid to take up a role in NCA, and this was cleared out before he took it up. So it looks like there is some miscommunication between the people running COA and maybe the ombudsman, or maybe because he's an independent authority, he calls for an independent approach. So it remains to be seen whether Dravid will write in reply or maybe come and have a meeting with Mr. Jain, and the issues will be sorted out. So these were some of the interesting off-field news from the cricketing world. Going further, if you were to look at the trivia question, so the trivia question from the previous episode was, when was the last time two bowlers bowled an entire completed innings, that is a test innings, before the England and Ireland test? So we know that the fourth innings of the England and Ireland test had just Stokes and Vokes and Broad bowling. So the previous such occasion was the question. So the previous such occasion was New Zealand versus England in March 2018, in which Saudi and Bolt bowled England out for 58. So as usual, our keen listener, Yogesh, has got the answer right. And we also encourage other listeners to write in with an answer. The trivia question from this week is a sort of an exploratory one. So the question is, how many times in the history of T20s have maidens been bowled in the last over? As we discussed earlier, there was a maiden bowled by Steyn in the last over of the first T20 between England, India and West Indies. Therefore, the question is, how many such occasions have happened in T20s, and not just international T20s, but overall T20s overall? So we have an idea of what the answer is, but we are very keen to also listen if some of our listeners come up with a different answer, so we can get into a discussion about this in the upcoming episode. You could get in touch with us about your thoughts of what is the right answer for this trivia question, or with your thoughts and comments about our podcast through social media medium. For example, we are on Twitter at Armchair Cricket Pod. On Facebook page, we could also write in using our Facebook page, or you could write into us at armchair.cricket@gmail.com. You could also leave a comment on YouTube or any of the podcasting apps you use, Podbean, Acast, Stitcher, whichever, it's not a problem. So as we continue to discuss a very interesting Ashes test coming up and more international cricket involving India and West Indies for sure. So I hope you're all tuned in and you're able to also listen to our upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening and have a good day. Bye-bye.
You're listening to the Armchair Cricket Podcast.